Welcome to Business Unveiled Podcast. This is the place where we help overwhelmed, time-starved entrepreneurs like you make the profitable shifts to get more done and get more out of life. I'm your host, Angela Profit, award-winning 8-figure entrepreneur and CEO. And in every episode of Business Unveiled, I'm bringing you conversations that will give you the expertise and strategies that will scale your team and business so you can get shit done. That's GSD in our world. So get your time back and grow a business that helps you be present in your life. Let's do this, y'all. Hi, y'all. It's Angela. I'm back for another episode of Business Unveiled. And I'm so excited for our guest today because this is so incredibly timely. If you have a business, which I know pretty much all of you listening do, and you've experienced this thing called the pandemic, which we all have no matter where you are in the entire world, we've got an expert here. She is an attorney of B as in boy, P as in profit, and we'll put this all in the show notes, law, and your contract buddy. And so it's like a fun, approachable way to make sure that you creatives have your shit together. So Gersha, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Angela. I am really honored to be on your show and actually really looking forward to our conversation.
Yay, I'm super excited.
Thank you for the kind introduction.
Of course. Before we hop off and jump into law and pandemic and all that good stuff, I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about your journey and how did you know that you wanted to get into law? What was your driving force of okay, I'm going to do this kind of thing? So share with us how you grew up and how have you gotten to where you are today?
I love that question. In fact, I know when pre-interview, you had asked, what's a question no one's asked you before? And I'm like, I don't know. This is actually a great question because I knew I wanted to be in law school. I think in middle school, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer in middle school. I don't know why. I just felt like I had the ability to debate. I had the ability to put arguments together. I had the ability to communicate effectively. That's what I thought. And so
I love it.
That's what I thought. Okay. While I do, but I definitely refined a lot of those skills.
That's awesome.
Of course, law is not only that. And, but I do think that it was something that was already in my genes. And I say that because my family is from India. My parents are, they came to America. My dad came here for master's in his university here. And then my mom came and then I was born here. But my family's roots are all in India. And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, so my dad's grandfather was actually in his time, it was during the independence time in India when they were trying to get independence from the British regime, and around about that time, my great-grandfather was also a huge criminal defense attorney in India.
Okay.
And not only that, he was a member of the parliament as well. And all of his brothers were also they held some position of political power, and not a small one, like something like governor of the state, equivalent to that. Mm-hmm. And so I think it kind of just runs in my DNA unknowingly, like those characteristics that you would see in a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I was very honed into them beforehand, even before, I truly knew the deep history of my family per se. And it just kind of was a very organic thing for me. Like I did debate in high school. I was, I loved doing all that stuff. Then went to college. I did business undergrad. I was University of Texas in Austin, did business undergrad, but I'm like, I'm going to go to law school. So even in my internships, they're like, oh, so do you want to join us? I'm like, no, thank you. I'm going to law school.
You're like, I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Oh my gosh. I have never known what I always wondered, why don't people know what they want? Because I was on the opposite spectrum. But I tell you this, I also laugh at myself because the thing is, those pivots in life don't happen necessarily to everybody at the same time. And sometimes you get a whole nother rebirth at a different stage in life. And my rebirth happened after I had my kids. because I went to law school, I did all that great stuff. I started my law career as a prosecutor in Harris County, and so for lack of a better way, I put people in jail, but I was in court all the time. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work, and like tons of work. And in the process, I also got married. Aww. And so I was just like, I'm married to my husband. I have my law degree. Nobody can take that away from me, from my education.
Right.
I am not married to this job. And I knew at that time that I wanted to really enjoy my first years of marriage rather than living like we don't even know each other because our schedules would clash so much. Mm-hmm. So I got the experience I needed. I, created my network and did what I needed to do. But then I also was like, this is a time to leave. So I left and I started my law practice at that time. And at that time, it was a very different practice. It looked very different. I was serving other businesses, but not necessarily my creative entrepreneur community that I am serving now. And then I actually had I started this practice and then I got pregnant with my daughter. And right before she was born, I finished like all the client work that I had on my table. I finished it. And I was just like, I'm going to close up shop right now. I want to spend time with my children. I want to spend time raising my child. And
so you were in solo practice?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did solo practice.
I'm going to close up and be a mom.
Yes. So Angela, I actually thought my vision was such where when I started my solo practice, I thought, well, let me start this. And then by the time I have children, it'll be a well-oiled machine.
You can sell it.
Yeah, that didn't happen though. That didn't happen.
Oh
because but that didn't happen. I was really young and I didn't have the right projection on what I was doing. Mm. There was no plan of action. There was just doing. And so
Me too. That was the first 10 years of my life.
Yeah. And so, when you think back, you're like, okay, great. That was awesome experience. But also closing up shop and, being a mom was a hard decision to make, definitely with trade-offs. And it was definitely a decision I chose for myself. And, and people are like, well, you made the decision and you were so lucky because you were able to do that. And I'm just like, but hello, I actually had a trade-off too. And yes, it was my choice, but I also didn't work for 6 years. That was a long time in a professional life not to be working. Yeah. And for the longest time, I was also kind of embarrassed to share that because I would feel like, well, the reason is not for any other reason, but for where if I'm a lawyer, and if I go into a group of other lawyers, especially men, and I'm like, I haven't worked for 6 years, they're going to be like, why are you standing here with us? Honestly, that's what I thought. Not that they're thinking that, not that anybody has said that to me, but it's your own insecurities that pop up. Right. And so I had to come to terms with that because I also had to realize that those 6 years I had 2 babies. I was sitting on the board of multiple charities in Houston and, national global charities as well. Yeah. And I was also organizing and helping events and I was creating those 6 years. I was helping my husband, who is an entrepreneur as well, has a family business. I was helping him with his marketing and his events, and I was creating again. So all of this experience that we feel like it's not enough because it may not align with what our education was or what we feel like we're meant to be was actually just helping me build a stronger foundation for my business later on, which I didn't know until I organically fell into that too. So
that's awesome though.
Yeah. And
did you decide like after the babies went to kindergarten, like, okay, I'm going to get back into it?
So my daughter started and then I had my second one, and then he was starting school that year, actually, the year before he started school, actually. I went to a blogger conference because I had started this thing on Facebook called City Tatler. And City Tatler was this very just a group of people who are sharing what's happening in their city, or if they have questions, they can basically ask live questions because it's a group and people can answer. So it's very interactive. Let's talk about our city or our travels and share information. And that kind of led me to this blogging conference in 2016. It's called the Thrive Blogger Conference. It's amazing. And I, happened to go into this thinking, oh, maybe I'm doing this blogging thing. And I actually started talking about my background, and people just stopped talking about business. And now they were just like hooked into the legal world and hooked into, oh my gosh, we have these XYZ problems. And at that point, I'm like, why don't you already know this? Or why haven't you already done this?
Because us creatives, we don't know what we don't know until shit goes down. And then we're like, oh shit. And that's the thing, right? Like, I just happened to have that knowledge. If I didn't, then I would have been the same boat as them. If it's like me going to the doctor and they're being like, why didn't you come here sooner? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know it was wrong. Like, I didn't know something was wrong with me. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And so that kind of opened my eyes. And it was, again, a very organic way for me to say, I understand the creative industry because of all this experience I've had. I know what you want. I know the passion behind your business. And now I can really serve you in a way that will help you not only create a solid foundation for your business, but also help you pursue your passion with confidence. And that's what I do. And I love doing it. I really enjoy doing that.
I love that.
Yeah, it just really was, when you reflect back and all the insecurities that you have in life, sometimes you also realize it was designed for a purpose. And if you take it that way and use it as a tool, then you can really help whatever focus or where you're moving forward in.
Absolutely. So when COVID, this pandemic thing hit, how did it change your business, or did it change your business at all?
So for me, COVID, I feel like, I don't know, for me, it was like almost like a COVID proof business. If anything, I got more, just because what happened is I got more busy, which was such a blessing. But at the same time, me getting busy means somebody else is hurting at times.
Yeah.
And so, which also is like a narrative that I want to change with my creative community, because I feel then, the creative entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs in general, we like to, jump off the plane and then figure out how to make that, whatever's going to help us and help, make that parachute. We're not going to think about how to build a parachute before we jump. And so I feel like with law also, we need to change the narrative a bit and not make it so reactionary, but more so preventative and proactionary. So, during COVID, I did get busy, but I got busy because I as creative, who I serve a lot of event industry professionals as well, which includes your event planner, venue owners. It includes also photographers and other types of vendors as well. And so unfortunately, that became a huge problem because, of course, people were not able to have their events the way they wanted to, especially weddings. And so there was lots of cancellations happening, lots of rescheduling happening. People didn't know what force majeure was. They were like, oh, we've always seen it in our contract. Luckily, if you had one. If you didn't, then that was also an SOL situation.
Yeah.
But it kind of like brought into light this whole, clause that people generally overlook and are just kind of like, gosh, this is taking up so much space in this contract. But when you need it, it's insurance. And so that's what I started doing a lot during 2020. A lot of my work was helping people figure out their business, the trajectory of where they were going with their clients, and not just creating a contract for them, but also talking about legal strategy, like strategy that kind of turns into business strategy on how to handle these situations and how to actually implement them for the future, and not just as one person, but how to make it as a business process in your business.
So for any business owner listening, and they probably have maybe by now figured out, like, I don't know. I feel like I mentor some younger entrepreneurs, and they aren't even asking the question of what should I be putting in my contract, or like, how can I protect my business? Like, even though you would think like if you go through it once and then you would protect yourself. It's like, I'll never forget. I never had a jerk clause or like an asshole clause. And then I had this client who he was just mentally ill. He really was. And I can say that because I worked in a mental hospital, but I didn't have any type of a protecting me to get out of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I presented that, and of course he threatened, he's like, well, if you don't finish out this project, I'll sue you and blah, blah, blah. And so we did finish it out. And I mean, I was much younger entrepreneur back then. But then after we finished that project, I'm like, never again. We have to protect ourselves in our contracts so that if there's immoral behavior, which there was, if there's lying or stealing or, basically a jerk clause. And in talking to a lot of people, I've been speaking in a lot of rooms on this new app called Clubhouse. And to some people it's not new anymore, but it's like, I'm fascinated by the fact yesterday I was in a room and we were talking about difficult clients from the psychology angle. And someone said, I mentioned having like a jerk clause in my contract, and they're like, what is that? What do you mean? And I'm like, well, when you work with a difficult client and you're not protecting yourself, or they're acting immoral, or they're money laundering, if you watch Ozark, or
lovely show.
Yeah, I mean, we've been part of shit like that before. It's like you want to protect yourself and get out. So what are some things that anybody that's listening, like how can they really make sure that they're protected in their contract? First off, if you don't have a contract, people, you've got to have a contract or a service agreement, period, the end. Like you have to. But what are some things that they do? Because I don't feel like people understand. No one really talks about this. Like what's an act of God, or like what can they do to protect themselves like in future pandemics? Because nobody was prepared for this. Not even the large brands like Hilton and Omni. Like no one was prepared for this.
No, they weren't. I know, like, so just talking about the Hiltons and the Omnis of this world, and then I'll go into what can they do to protect themselves. The Hilton, the Omnis of this world, yes, they did not, they were not prepared. But then I also saw them really taking this out and stretching out the whole, well, let's just reschedule, or this has not become this kind of a tier in our internal operations where we would consider canceling this event, which is so ridiculous to me. I mean, straight up, are they going to be providing the manpower to host your event because of COVID? If they're not, how can they say that you have to still stick on to this contract? Like it just burned me when hotels were acting so outrageous and difficult in a time when everybody was suffering and everybody was confused and hurting in all different manners, right? And I think the pandemic also allowed many businesses to speak volumes about how they are as a community leader and how they are in building their community, as opposed to being greedy and very money centric. Okay, that was my TED talk on that. Okay, now going to, I love it. It just bothered me. Okay, so going to what can you do to protect yourself? So I know that a lot of event planners use different types of CRMs, right? You guys, sometimes they'll be using, I think, Aisle Planner, or they'll have Honeybook, or they'll have Dubsado, or just whatever the CRMs are there, right? Those are just a few of the many. And those CRMs also provide contracts, which is great. If you are, there's different types of there's different levels of a service a legal provider can give. In my business, I provide different tiers also, because I know that my clients are coming from different budget backgrounds. And so when you have those CRMs, a lot of them have built-in contracts, or they have contracts you can use. If you're just starting out, that's great, use them, but please read it. Number one, read your contract. Actually, number one is have a contract. Number two is read your contract, please. Read it. Don't hand over a contract blindly to a client or any other person across the table, because they're going to ask you a question. And when you can't answer that question effectively and with confidence, they're not going to want to sign that contract. They're also going to wonder how good of a business owner you are and how much do you know your business. So you really need to read it and understand it. And also see if that contract is aligned with the way your business is running. If these templates are there, they're great. I offer templates too on Your Contract Buddy. But you also have to see if it really aligns with your business practices. So you have to, at the end of the day, kind of curate it for your business if you haven't already. Some things to watch for in these contracts. Make sure the terms, which is the payment, the services you're providing, are pretty on point and they're detailed in the sense of you're describing what you're doing and you're describing the conversations you've had with your client. And you're not just adding some random things in there that are surprise, you owe me this much money now, because that's really not going to cut it. So don't have any surprise fees unless you've already been upfront about, I might have to charge you for anything extra that we've not talked about here today. And it's going to be at the price at that time. And things like that do happen, right? Extra hours in the event industry, or you have to call in an extra person, or something happens last minute. And so you have to make all these changes. And so those things do take time, and you want to be upfront with your client that I might have to charge extra for that because it's something that we're not preparing for. Another thing to look at also is, to help you exit or to help give you a little bit more cushion on discretion, is that jerk clause that you were calling it.
Yep.
It's more like just, providing a safe environment for you, whether that is misbehaving behavior by a guest, even somebody who could be harassing or speaking badly. Or I've heard of photographers walking into a photography session that they're supposed to have with the groomsmen and half of them are naked, like when they should have been absolutely ready for that photography session. And it's scary, and if they've been drinking and things happen, but you need to have a clause in there to say, hey, listen, if we're uncomfortable, we're going to leave. And that's it. That's that. And so that allows that freedom also to say, I'm not going to stand here and feel berated or feel scared for my safety because I've said I'm going to work for you. My working doesn't mean that I'm going to compromise all these other things.
Right.
Right. And I mean, and of course you have to give discretion. You can't just be like, oh, someone said this to me, I'm offended, I have to leave. Like it's very discretionary.
Yeah.
And I would definitely, have a conversation with the people that have hired you or have signed that contract with you, your client, and tell them the situation. And if they have not cured it or made it better, then of course leave. There's just no other option. And the safety environment is not just the way people are behaving with you. It's also about how you were saying, money laundering, being a criminal, you're part of a criminal activity unknowingly, or, even like if you know that there are people there that just with the COVID, right? They know that there's family members that are sick and they're not getting testing, and you found out. I mean, I would want to leave. I wouldn't want to be there because you don't know when it's going to happen. So, that's a very important clause to have, a clause that sometimes people don't think it should be there, or they think maybe, I had a lot of clients last year who was basic, or not just clients, but like other people who were like, well, we've never had a problem, so I don't know if this should even be a part of my contract. Or I've had clients who said, well, I've been really blessed. I don't think we need this. I don't think we need that. And so I was like, it's okay if you don't need it right now. Just keep it in there and delete it if you don't want it. But really, I want you to have it. I want you to have this clause in there because you've had a good stretch right now of good clients, but that one client is what makes you want to have all these clauses in there. So having that, and then I know, right? And then
it gets longer and longer.
Then you want a model release where they're allowing you to use their images and the images of the event for your personal advertising and promotional materials. You want to have them agree to that. And of course, a solid rescheduling and cancellation policy where it's pretty clear on what that is and how it looks, and the process to follow also. So it's not just when you can cancel or reschedule, but it's also if you can reschedule, then you give a time frame for it. And then if you are canceling, then what is the roadmap for that? How does cancellation look? Is it just cancellation, everybody walks away? Or do people keep a certain amount of money with them? Or, do you get a refund? Like, what does that look like? And so you need to make sure you have that written in there.
Yeah. So have you had a lot of, I'm just interested to know, because I know no one was really prepared for this. And
Right.
so have you had a lot of people that you've seen completely change their reschedule and their cancellation policy since the pandemic?
Absolutely. I have personally, like, this has been like where you sit down, you talk about what their business, what they want to do, like their ethos for the whole rescheduling cancellation. And it's very surprising how everyone has a different way of handling it, because a lot of it's emotional. A lot of it's, based on what they feel is right or wrong as well. But generally, a lot of them have put in, a lot of the contracts that I've looked at and we've done, a lot of them have where you can cancel. And if you're canceling, that's fine. And then the refund depends on the time of cancellation. And again, the rescheduling is where we've really curated a lot of it. And the rescheduling is if it's, first time COVID related reason, we can reschedule during this period of time. Prices can be or cannot be the same, just depending on that company. And then the second time, we're not going to just give you that courtesy. It may or may not happen because, I have had people that I've talked to in the industry where they've had clients change 3-4 times because of COVID, because they're just waiting for people to be able to get together, and they're waiting for the big gatherings. And that's just not fair to anybody. No. You're just, stringing somebody along is just too much waiting, and too many other things that are paused. And as vendors or service providers, you have a lot of other, you're booking a date, you're booking your vendors, you're trying to prepare, and then all of a sudden you have to change again. And of course, on the flip side, they're a wedding couple. This is their, for wedding couples, or even if a birthday or a big event, it's the only time you're going to have that event, and you want to celebrate it. So there's a lot of emotional attachment and investment happening in the event also. So it's a delicate situation, which I think if we can navigate it as business owners in a way where you're showing consideration and compassion, but at the same time trying to, make them understand where you're coming from. Right. And, I think especially for new business owners, a lot of things that they don't do, a lot of times they don't communicate enough. Right. And a lot of the process of communication, of sharing what your policies are, what your expectations are in your service, and what you expect from your clients is done in the onboarding time. That's when, that first call comes in. And then afterwards, you might meet them in person or on Zoom. And then you share some more of what you're expecting and how things will look. They also understand then if you're like, hey, I can't keep rescheduling because I have all these 5 other vendors that are waiting on me each time.
Yeah. And people don't understand that. And so we even have events that were supposed to happen in early 2020. We have now moved them. This is the 3rd time, which, I think people thought, oh, the ball would drop in 2021 and this shit's going to go away. And it's no, in fact, it got worse. At least where I live, we had the highest numbers in the world there for a month or so. It was really embarrassing in Nashville, but the health department would not allow us to have any events every single time. In every city and every county, I'm even learning, they all have their own rules, which is fine. And 2 clients in particular, it's I am not God. I don't set the rules. This is not your fault. This is not my fault. This is no one's fault. And we can't change it. This is simply the rules. And so we've changed venues multiple times because one of the venues completely shut down. They just said, we're not having anything for at least 15 months. They furloughed all their staff, all their musicians. It was at the Symphony, and we do a lot of events there. And so we went and found another venue. And then that venue said, there's no way, we're a new venue. There's no way that we're going to close down. Nothing's closing us down. We're 50% hotel, 50% event space. But then when the county that the business sits in says, you cannot have any events without submitting paperwork to the health department, and the health department has to okay it. So we started to go down this route early January for a client for February event. And then another planner that I actually coach, this is where the coaching and consulting, we're also well connected, thank God.
Yes.
Said something to us about, well, we had 150 people, which was 30% capacity for this large space, and they denied it. And so then they appealed it, and they came back and said, you can have 25 people with 2 drinks within a 5-hour event, no dance floor, no band, no, like you can have background music.
Right.
But it's like, if you're stripping away everything, like what's the point of the effing event? And so after that, I'm like, you know what? We're not waiting until 2 weeks before any event to submit any paperwork. Mm-hmm. We are just going to pull it. We are going to tell the client we're not having it. And so we've ended up doing that with all of our clients, and some of them for corporate, they have allowed us to take that food and beverage money and create online platforms and digital, which has been great. And the positive thing about that is that it didn't say that in our contract, originally it was supposed to be an in-person event at the Omni for 500 people. But I was kind of to the point of where, and thank God for our business attorney who has our back and make sure our ass is covered and everything. But, there was an addendum to it where it's like, okay, this is what we were doing. We're going to change this. And luckily, I just think that remaining flexible has been really good, especially for Nashville. The vendors have been gracious, and I always lead with, I know the contract says this, because I want to acknowledge it. You have a contract for a flipping reason. Mm-hmm. I'm like, however, due to what the health department is saying, and we know that we can't just slash 150 people off this guest list. If we were to move it to the fall, or if we were I know that there was a tiered, a cost breakdown. So it's if you move to the summer, if you move to the fall, if you move to the winter, if you move to 2022, there was a pricing tier. And every single person that we have talked to, they have a heart and they're like, you know what, this isn't your fault. It's not the client's, no one's fault. And exactly what you just said, there's so many things that you have to make sure are going to work for about 45 different flipping vendors. It's not just the ceremony location and the reception location, but then it's there's only one type of photographer that this client wanted. And then we found a date, and then the photographer was like, I'm not available. And then I'm like, oh geez. And it brings up this whole, it's like a domino effect. And there's a lot of planning behind the scenes that people don't see. And it is time consuming, but
it is.
People have been very gracious and flexible. But addendums have been sent out to say, this is what the expectation is. This is what the food and beverage minimum is. And some of it is a little bit higher. I mean, you're dealing with inflation every year, regardless of a pandemic or not. But have you seen that people are being more flexible and not it has to be this kind of thing?
Yeah. No. I mean, everybody is more flexible. Well, okay. Most people are flexible, and that is because everybody, again, has a heart, like you said, and they're understanding that it's a situation that is so out of their control, right? Mm-hmm. And while COVID is not a force majeure event anymore, because everybody has known about it, and now they can take actions according to force majeure. I mean, according to the COVID and the policies that are happening. But what you're right though about is the fact that each county, each city, each state has its own, rules that are happening. And the state might say something, the governor might say something, and then the county is like, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to make it even more narrow, and this is how it's going to be. And that's because, they have the, legally they can do that, and legally they have the authority to do that. So they do it. And I feel like right now, everybody's, health is what is most important. It is trying to make sure that this is not becoming a mass hysteria like it was in the beginning. So yes, I do see more flexibility. I do see clients, the people, the clients, and even the vendors and all being more flexible. But at the same time, I do see the flexibility causing a lot of pain, right? It could be financial pain. It could just be stress. It could also just be any relationships also, whether it's in personal or business, kind of getting overshadowed by all of this as well. And so flexibility does give ease, though. It takes away a lot of the stress that somebody might have just to make sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do. And another great clause to have in your contract, just, to kind of give extra flexibility in a contractual relationship, is to have a waiver clause. And the waiver clause is just saying that just because one party might waive their right to invoke their rights under the contract doesn't mean that they're waiving it for the future. So it allows you to say, it's okay if you can't make this payment right now, I get it. But, if they continually do that or just don't pay you, that doesn't mean that you've completely, erased your right to go and say, hey, you've breached your contract because you didn't pay me. And so they can't say, well, you allowed me to not pay you.
Right.
And so that's a great, I love, it's a boilerplate clause, but I love it because it really gives flexibility to the parties to also kind of show, go with emotions on the flow of the relationship and the season that they're in.
Yeah. And one more thing that you brought up that I want to circle back to. So you talked about event images and video, and I got into a little bit of a gray area where in my contract it says, and the clients can either initial it or not initial it, that any of the design photos, like, we can use and repurpose. And I have a coaching program and I have a photography online stock company. So anything that we do, we can use towards, like you said, market, do whatever. And I even had times where I hired my own photographer, paid them because I wanted my own images, and the vendors loved that. But I assumed, which you should never assume, guys, that, I own those images, right? Well, a lot of these people, I was friends with them. We would work together a lot. And then once I made a company out of the design images to help inspire other people, I had a photographer come at me and said, those are my images. I own those images. And I'm like, no, I hired you and paid you. And so she tried to sue me, which I don't know why you would bite the hand that feeds you business, but it was a much bigger, there was a much bigger issue going on there with some images that Apple had used or some other large brands. And it was all about credit. They just wanted the credit. And I'm like, well, let's have a conversation. She would never have a conversation with me. She's like, you need to go through my attorney. Our attorneys can talk. I was like, okay, well, I've got an attorney too. And so my attorney's like, from now on, even if they're friends and you work a ton, he's like, you have to have just, even if it's a contract it's a half of a page, that if you hire them to take pictures for you, that you own those images and you can do whatever you want with those images. And because I am a creative and I'm a nice person and I just like to have fun, like, I didn't even think that it was going to be a problem. But the bigger thing that this person didn't know was we were going to give all of it, which we still do. We pay the creatives a percentage of anything that we make off of our stock image company. So it's a way to create passive income if you submit those images. My clients had no problem with it, but my attorney was like, this is very gray because you really need a contract with the photography team and with the video team if you're going to use the footage, in a different way. And so we ended up just like hiring our own internal person so that we can own all of our photo video stuff.
That was actually the best route you took.
Yeah.
By hiring your own internal person, like as an employee of your business, right?
Yeah. So it's become, this big thing where it's like, I was never trying to steal an image or do anything. I'm like, and then it goes all the way down to like, well, then you've got the florist that is creating the flowers, and then you've got the rental and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I was just trying to help the industry people. Like, this is getting like way too difficult, but it all comes down to having your legal shit together.
Yeah.
Like completely. You've got to have it all buttoned up. It
Absolutely. So you're so right. So this whole, I'm glad you brought it up, the intellectual property side of things. So this particular matter that you're talking about actually goes to copyright, and your lawyer was giving you the right guidance on that. So what happens is that most people don't know this unless you're in the industry, is that photographers actually own their images. You're only allowed to use it to showcase it to your family or on your, on your social media, if they know that they're creating it for those reasons. But you're supposed to not really profit from them because ultimately it's intellectual property that's owned by the photographer. Those photographs are an original work of authorship that's put into a tangible medium, which is the actual definition of copyright. And that is owned by the photographer. Now, in order to get ownership of that, the photographer has to assign you the right to own it, where there's actually a written instrument, technically, that says that he or she is assigning you the rights to the photographs or videos or anything that they're creating, and that ultimately you have rights over it, and they are not going to be taking you, royalty or anything like that. Now, also another way to bypass, if they don't want to give you rights, is a license. It's a license for you to use it for your personal reasons, and it would be a pretty broad license where you're not paying them anything. You've already paid them, and you're just basically able to use it for whatever purposes you want. A lot of photographers don't do that, though. They don't like to give all that out because it is their work, and sometimes they want to showcase it for whatever reasons. But I think your solution, if you are a company and you're a big enough company where this is where you are, creating images for another revenue stream or another aspect of your business, the solution you chose is to hire an employee and have them take photographs is the perfect solution. Not an independent contractor, but an employee, because whatever an employee does within the scope of their work during the time that they're working is owned by the company that has hired them. And so all the work product that they create is owned by the company. Whereas on the flip side, an independent contractor, which would be your photographer in this situation, they actually own everything unless you have a made for hire clause in their contract and an assignment of rights in their contract.
It gets so muddy.
Very complicated.
I know. I'm I was just trying to help the industry, and I'm just trying to instead of my coaching clients buying stock images to make it look like they've done luxury events, I'm they actually have somebody that they can come back to coach them and consult them on actually how to do. And that's the thing with Pinterest. It's people see these images and they're yeah, I can do that. Maybe do it for 40 people. But then you ask them, for Indian weddings, it's we would have 800, 900, over 1,000 people at these Indian weddings. And you have to duplicate all of these design things. And if you don't have your team together, it's just not that easy. So it I don't know. It fascinated me. I learned a lot about that.
And just another thing is that attribution does not give ownership. Attribution also does not give you the right to use somebody's copyright protected content. Of course, a lot of people are okay with it because they get recognition. It's a form of advertising for them. And so a lot of times people, don't even know that. They think attribution equals, basically the agreement to use somebody's, but that's not true at all. Attribution is just courtesy. That's all it is. And so it's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to do. I like to attribute my photographer in every picture that I post of my brand photography, but at the same time, it's a professional courtesy that you're giving. It's not permission.
Yeah. It's just, it's so much communication sometimes. It's if you just have a conversation about what the outcome is and then put it in a contract so that you make sure that you've got your butt covered. It matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think contracts are so essential.
It's so important.
It's so important. It doesn't mean you're undermining that relationship or thinking that people are not trustworthy. You're just further edifying all the conversations you've already had. That's all it is.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, because we're out of time, I know that people can go. I want you guys, listen, if you don't have a contract or if you need like a brush up, go to yourcontractbuddy.com. Your site is awesome. And we'll put everything in the show notes because you've also got gbplaw.com as well.
Yes.
And you've got, tell us about the 5-day legal challenge.
Yeah, so my 5-day legal challenge is actually the ability to self-audit your business. And it really gives you a lot of empowerment because you kind of, it exposes different layers of protection your business could need and also areas of law that are pretty prominent in your business. And it's like a guided self-audit that you can do with lots of worksheets and prompts. And so it's really intense and pretty robust. But it really helps. And plus you get some videos with me in it in your email. But it's an email, self-paced, self-audit.
That's awesome. We will put everything in the show notes. So if you're driving or you're doing something else, be safe. Okay. Because I know a lot of you listen while you drive. And then what is your favorite social platform for people to connect with you on?
I am super active on Instagram. Clubhouse, I'm still navigating, still figuring it out. I'm like, do I really have this time? Not really. I mean, honestly, I love Instagram. I put out a lot of information. I have a lot of legal 101 type stuff on IGTV and plus lots of links to other free stuff. And just DM me. I love connecting. I love talking.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome. And everyone that's listening, thank you so much for listening. And be sure to tune in next week to another episode of Business Unveiled. Bye, y'all. That's it for this week's episode of Business Unveiled. Now that you have all the tools that you need to conquer the world and GSD, get shit done, would you share this with your friends and fellow business leaders? One thing that would really, really help us and help new listeners is for you to rate the show and leave a comment in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you tune in and listen to Business Unveiled. You can check out the show notes at angelaprofit.com/podcast and link up with us on social media so you can share your biggest insights. And I want to know your aha moments. Until next week, remember, the profitable shifts and structures you're creating in your business help you be more present in your life. So get out there and GSD.